Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. How is everyone doing? Good to see you all doing a Substack live tonight. Super, super jazzed about the election results last night. Personally, I hedged my bets in my brain about like what might happen, but the people, the fourth branch of American government showed up last night, and I'm happy about that. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about like what this all means, what it doesn't mean, like how I think we should think about it. You don't have to agree with me, of course. You can choose to make me an authority figure or not in your thinking. I'm a liberal after all. Um, Epistemic humility is necessary. But anyways, so I'll tell you how I think about it, and you can choose to take those thoughts on board and integrate them or not. I think it was a pleasant surprise for the spirit of democracy and human dignity last night. There's obviously a lot of reactions across the board. I'm gonna maybe try to thread for you how I see it, how I interpret, in particular, the victory of Zoran Mamdani in New York. There's kind of the conversation that's happening among the sort of the political chattering classes is has to do with the S word, the socialism, right? And what Mamdani represents, like whether this means that the Democratic Party is moving towards becoming a socialist party, and what that might mean, and for centrists fear that means that Democrats won't be electable. This is and then of course, I don't identify as a socialist, as you might know. I'm a liberal. I'm a small liberal. I defend the liberal tradition. um and so we should talk about that. We should talk about like these terms: socialism, liberalism, what I think anyways. I mean, Americans in general political discourse don't use these terms uh, terribly consistently, and and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding, I think, about what these words means, but we can get into that. I don't want to geek out yet, because last night was a good night. And it's a time to remind ourselves, right, that resistance is possible, that um that we don't have to accept the slow march of decline, and we don't have to just basically sit here stunned as the grips of despotism uh lower down around us. We can fight back. And that's what happened last night. Now, the other side of it, of course, is that like we shouldn't be taking false comfort in this. Uh, there are still people who have a lot of power. Donald Trump is still the president of the United States. His vice president JD Vance still sits in the line of succession, and we still have a Congress that is completely uninterested in providing oversight or standing up for its authority in any meaningful way. We have this whole shutdown happening there. We have the Marjorie Taylor Greene side story, which I think, just to be clear, is huge. I think the Marjorie Taylor Greene thing is huge. Um, and we can talk about that tonight. And I want to be like precise about why I think it's huge. But I also want to keep reminding you that none of these things in isolation means that like this nightmare, this terror that we're all living through is approaching its conclusion, because it's not. We're going to be dealing with this nightmarish type environment, political environment, for years to come. And that's that's got to be okay, right, for us, right? Like we're living our lives, we're still doing this, we're still loving our children, we're still moving forward. But we're in this period now where the power, where power sits in our society is being contested by a set of forces that we all know. We know what our task is, right? Which is to defend human dignity, right? And in my case, I think we need to defend the small liberal tradition upon which this country was founded. That's the task. That's the uh, and as AOC said last night to press interviewing her from Zoran Mondani's victory party. We all also have those of us who stand opposed to fascism and to despotism. We have an assignment, and our assignment is to oppose them, and that much is true. So, what does that mean? Well, I mean, it certainly means that a liberal like myself is on the same side of that battle as a democratic socialist, Zoran Mondani, even if him and I might have some differences in how we think, we should go about solving our society's problems. We also have convergences as well, right? I mean, uh, I think there's a lot of space in liberal discourse and liberal politics for provisioning public goods, right? Like, I mean, I don't think it's inherently socialist to have a universal daycare program, right? I think that liberals, classical liberals, like philosophically, can rationalize like the importance of you know provisioning public goods, educate. I mean, Thomas Jefferson, right, one of the founding fathers, was a huge proponent of the government funding public schools, um, in order to in order to create an educated citizenry that can govern themselves, right? Eleanor Roosevelt talked about this as well. So I mean, there's I and through that lens, I actually don't think that Zoran Mondani is like actually proposing anything that's like radical or illiberal, right? I mean, socialism can be illiberal, right, in some of its forms, right? And that's where like where theoretically do liberals and socialists draw swords with each other? Um, is often the question. Um, but I mean, like, for the most part, right? Like most modern socialists, I mean, I would argue are, you know, I mean, they're, I mean, so there's a political theorist, a political scientist, Matthew McManus, right, who has sort of this theory of like liberal socialism, um, that I think is sort of like thinking about sort of like socialist sort of like theories around sort of like economic power, like inside like a liberal framework. And that's all like interesting and fun. And obviously we have like social democracy, like third way socialism, right? That's associated with say like Tony Blair and like the Labor Party. Um and so what does that like word like really mean? Well, I mean, it doesn't like it does what socialism appears to mean to me, based on most of the mainstream adherents of the term, and we're talking about like people like Alexia Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, uh and most of the people who sort of associate with that way of thinking about politics. um I mean, I think they're mostly like, I mean, I mean, I think they're mostly like liberal socialists, like in the sense that like I do think they're mostly focused on distributional debates, around how we provision like public goods and how we balance competing power interests in economic life. And, I mean, is that like is that the same thing as like the Soviet Union, or Hugo Chavez's Bolivarian Revolution? Uh, no, no, it's not. I mean, these are this is I mean, this is there's like an intellectual tradition, right, where these things like intersect. But are they, is that like the direction in which like all sort of like socialist thought goes? No, and we have so many counterexamples of this, right? Like, it's like we have like European countries that have been that have had socialist parties in power for decades, right? And they're still around today, and they still have like private businesses operating within them, and they're still sort of relatively rich developed countries. There is just something that has to be said, that um far be it from me, like a liberal, and I do have disagreements with socialist theory, like I do, right? I mean, it's fun, it's academic, and we can get into it. But I mean, like, do I like fear like the kind of socialist that Zoran Mondani is? Like, no, no. Like, I think he's um uh operating, as far as I can tell, um, well inside the bounds of regular, like, liberal politics. He wants to raise taxes. That's fine. The government has taxation power. He wants to establish like public goods, these grocery stores across the five boroughs of New York City. Like, whether or not you think that's a good idea or not, like, governments can do this. I mean, governments, like, I mean, in almost half the states in this country, governments like operate liquor stores, right? Like, I mean, like, this like, I mean, this isn't breaking new ground, right? In terms of like what government in the United States can do. Um, so I think that um, I think this idea that Zoran Mondani presages this sort of like revolutionary communist moment in the United States, which is like how I think, I mean, I do think, like, I was talking to some of my, I mean, I sometimes I struggle to call some of these people friends anymore. But when I, like, have like signal exchanges with them, and chats with them, and just sort of like see how they're reacting, I mean, like, they do seem to genuinely like believe that there is a sort of this threat now, that we could sort of be months away from what, not months, but maybe years away from sort of having, like, rationing lines at the sort of the government, food distribution depot, and presenting our ration cards in some sort of dark, communist dystopia. And I mean, that this is just dumb. It's just dumb, right? It's dumb, right? Uh, Mondani is not a revolutionary figure. Like, really, like, actually, he's a like, he's no, like, he's proposing like a lot of the, like, a lot of policies that, I mean, if you're a European or a Canadian, or you're from like any other part of the developed world where there's just sort of just greater acceptance of the government's role in provisioning public goods. I mean, a lot of these policies he's promoting, like, just kind of just exist like in other parts of the developed world, and are not, like, considered the literal end of capitalism. So yeah, I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. That people think that way, but they do. It's a strange thing. I mean, I find this, like, I mean, most of my life is like this now. Just trying to like really understand like why people like believe the things that they do, because um most people tell ourselves stories that um conform to weird fears that don't have any relationship with sort of the actual risks that are in front of us. I mean, it's common in like mundane and pedestrian things too, right? Like more people are afraid of flying on an airplane than getting in a car. Despite the fact I think like one in what is it like one in every 115 Americans will die in a car accident in their lifetime. Maybe that's going down with like self-driving cars, but that was like true for a long time. But like your chance of being in a airplane, like, disaster is like one in the millions, right? So we're not good at attributing like fear in a sane way as humans, and certainly not in politics either, because we backed ourselves into a corner where both people on both sides think every election is existential, which is not true, right? Um well, at least it's becoming more true now, but that sort of this trap that we get ourselves into, as with as sort of like evolved apes, right? With a amygdala that's just a little bit too big, and a prefrontal cortex is a little bit too small. So anyways, Mom Donnie, what does it mean? I mean, I mean, this I think is it doesn't mean that the answer is socialism, although democratic socialism and that is an answer to a question that voters and a lot of and depoliticized and dejected people are asking, which is that, like, who out there is going to stand up and stick up for me, right? And Zoran Mondani answered that question. He said, I'm going to be that person that goes up against, these moneyed interests that have corruptly, held hands with the halls of power in our democratic institutions, in our city government, in the case of New York City. The metro the the thing is that, like, this is why we see the anti-establishment uh uprising on both the left and the right, right? It's like why you see the sort of the populist left that's been sort of screaming at the corporate Democrats. It's not like I think like a lot of people look at this, especially like within the establishment, within the elite, and what they think when they hear that is that this is a person that is like, you know, uh, trying to relitigate sort of the Cold War arguments, right, between like central planning and sort of, dynamic, like, minimally regulated markets, right? The sort of the neoliberal view versus the sort of this economic populist view. And I think what needs to be said is that, like, um that the neoliberal prescription developed cancer, and it became a very advanced cancer in the form of becoming a basically restructuring our political economy in such a way that the private sector, that corporate America, multinational corporations, and also, by the way, like in the sort of the global political economy, like sort of zooming out like even more, concentrating a lot of power over in the hands of foreign despots. Like Xi Jinping has a lot of power over you if you're an American citizen, right? Example of this, right, was I'll give you a real example of like the power in which, and I'll bring this back to neoliberalism because I think Xi Jinping is related to, like, one of the structural failures of neoliberalism. When the new Top Gun movie, Top Gun Maverick movie was produced, one of the things that had happened was is that you know, Tom Cruise's character in the movie, for those of you who don't know, had a Taiwan patch, right, on his flight jacket, um, in the original Top Gun movie, and that patch was removed, in order for the film to be distributable in mainland China. And so, um, not even just mainland China anymore. I mean, like Hong Kong has been sort of brought to heel. So I don't think we I don't know that we need to make that distinction anymore. People's Republic of China. Um, and like that's our American cultural industry responding to the the political desires of a foreign despot. And that foreign despot has that power, like in no small part due to the trade relationship that was built, the what sometimes called the Washington Consensus, right? In this sort of this neoliberal project to globalize and liberalize trade. And I think and that sort of has this corrupting effect that spreads deep into America, because you have someone like Tim Cook and Elon Musk and these American titans who have large portions of their companies in China, and and beholden to China. So, if Xi Jinping comes to one of these guys and says, like, your company has to do this or that, or like we're gonna make it hard for you, to operate in China. You could lose like half your business. Um, that's power that a foreign dictator has over American interests, right? That affects like that, and that has happened. That has happened. um I can tell you from personal experience working in Silicon Valley that people would get very, very nervous if someone like me went on Twitter when it was still called Twitter and tweeted something critical of the Chinese Communist Party. Like, that was considered like, you don't fucking do that. I mean, like, like, like the market, there's like you don't want to lose market access, right? Like, that's power. And that is a cultural, economic, and political power that the neoliberal project put in Xi Jinping's hands. And like that that just has to be acknowledged if we're going to have a serious conversation of like how we're going to unfuck this world and put power back in democratic hands, right? So that's like we talk often, right? A lot of folks sort of in the that critique neoliberalism, are often like just kind of focused on the sort of the privatization, reduction of the state, deregulation. I actually think in some ways the and this speaks, of course, right, to like why the anti-globalist critique, right, from the right is so powerful, right, in the eyes of ordinary people, right? And because I think that people just sort of they sense this. They sense that, like, on one hand, like, they're voting for politicians that don't seem to care about them. And they also notice that, like, these foreign governments in China and like the American companies are like leaning over backwards for them. They see the stories about like the Taiwan patch coming off of Tom Cruise's jacket, and they're like, what the fuck? What is going on? Why did that happen? Like, um, and you can kind of see like that, for somebody who isn't a jet setter and isn't like, you know, jumping from city to city on their private jet and checking in at the Four Seasons and Dubai. Like you can like what is it about that person's life that I'm like concerned with preserving? Anyways, so like that's like a really under discussed like element, I think, of like what the failure of neoliberalism actually represents. At the same time, right? Like I think the neoliberals got a lot right. There what I mean, I mean, some of the regulation, right, that neoliberalism reformed in the 1980s, 1990s across like various Western countries were good actually. And even like Zoran Mondani, like today, is like talking about like cutting red tape. Like there needs to, like there I think like there needs to there is an there needs need to be an understanding that um that one of the things that happens, and the neoliberals were really good at seeing this problem, and I think it's actually good now that like there's recognition of it, like on the left, like even among like democratic socialists, is that like you can get issues of like regulatory capture and rent seeking even within sort of regulatory regimes set up by the government that seem like they mean well, but then sometimes you end up like with the situation that California finds itself in, which is that like you can't build a solar farm because like there's like a Sierra Club lawsuit, and you're like, wait, I thought like the solar farm is getting us off fossil fuels, and now the environmentalists are telling us we can't build solar, and like what is going on? And what's really going on is that the people who own their like really big estates nearby don't like the look of it, and so they made a big donation to the Sierra Club. Like there is a kind of corruption like that, right, that people on the left like don't want to see. And what's actually encouraging is that like Zoran Mondani, he's like spoken about that. He actually seems to recognize that. And so those kinds of critiques that kind of came from the neoliberals were like actually like they were real, like valid problems. And like whether or not you like think that taxes should be higher, and we should trust bus companies, and we should have a higher minimum wage, like that, and all of that is just completely, that's fine, right? Like people can have these like positions, but like some of those critiques that came out of the neoliberal moment weren't wrong. They weren't wrong about those things, and there were like lots of really dumb regulations that were made in the 1960s and 1970s across the Western world that just like they were just stupid. They were stupid regulations, and some of them were good, and the neoliberals got rid of some good regulations that led to bad things. I mean, in the 1990s, like the repeal of Glass Steagall set the ticking time bomb that became the 2008 financial crisis. So like, I mean, like there was excess for sure. But I mean, that's like, that's how like I like see the world in that sense. So like, look, the 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 place we find ourselves in is I mean, it's precarious. It's a precarious situation, and I would count your rosebuds while you may, because like Trump is going to escalate from here. Um, the thing that really worries me, if I'm just like being fully open about like what I what my nightmares look like, um, is the fact that you have a regime that a kind of a it's kind of a competitive authoritarian regime, because you have Trump, but you also have gathered around him a bunch of people who are sort of looking beyond Trump into the post-Trump age. JD Vance is one of them, and you can imagine other Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene is another one. We're going to talk about her. I said we were going to talk about her because she's really important. You have Steve Bannon. You got like Peter Thiel and the tech fascist right that are like fucking around in the background, um, trying to figure out how to position themselves in the power vacuum that will that will come from Donald Trump's departure from the scene when that eventually happens. And like the fear that I have, right, is that these people have committed a lot of crimes. Like 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 bribery, like self-dealing, insider trading, just like the administration is a crime spree. Not to mention constitutional violations. Like who knows what we don't know, like, right? Like, inside the administration. Um, and they know this, right? Like these are corrupt people, right? I mean, they lie, right? They lie like they breathe. They're aware of their own corruption, and um, I think that when you when you put yourself in their shoes, the the um the fear that they have, right, of losing power is tied up in the realization that people like yours truly, and I mean this is my position, would like to see a lot of indictments and a lot of prosecutions. I think that CEOs of publicly traded companies that have showed up in the Oval Office and provided gifts in exchange for tariff relief, like I think they should go to jail for that. So yeah, we have a whole class of people right now that that the idea of like losing power um to a sort of a united opposition that kind of comes in there and rehires a lot of these fired FBI agents and brings Christopher Wray back to this FBI, and like like starts like being like let's like actually like investigate like all the fucking crimes they did. I mean, these people are terrified of that, and that makes them potentially willing to take some pretty big risks that put us all in extreme danger, like start wars, try to find like continue to do really dangerous things to try and divide the country, and create pretext for martial law, like we hear about Donald Trump like threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act. Like this is like the dangerous sort of psychology, this sort of cornered rat psychology that this group of really corrupt people are going to start like moving into more and more and more, especially if they feel the walls closing in around them. So let's talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene, how she fits into all of this. MTG. Um, so Marjorie Taylor Greene. Uh, I think she's represents something very significant. Um, I mean, my read of her is, I mean, my read of her is like what like most of your reads of her is that like she's kind of she's kind of out of her mind a little bit, right? She's very conspiratorial, right? And she obviously, we can go through all the crazy things that she said over the years. She's former QAnon, right? Which was she was confronted on about when she went on The View. um and she's like obviously very defensive, and she's been trying to distance herself from the Jewish space lasers thing that she posted on Facebook. And my read of her is that she's actually been on a sort of de-radicalization path of herself. I think she's she came from like a very like, I think she was very kind of captured by this hyper this very online culture. And it seems like for her, for a whole various set of like happenstance reasons, she's been increasingly like found herself in conversation with like people who were formerly enemies of her, like, right? Like she's speaking with like members of liberal media, and she's like she's taking these positions, and Democrats are like cheering for her the way she's sort of criticizing the Republican Party right now. And I think she's actually interestingly enough, like she's somehow like de-radicalizing herself. Um, does that mean that she's like, becoming like a liberal or a progressive? No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that like, we should wish for a President Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, I think her history is disqualifying on that point. But do I think that like she in some ways represents maybe like a bit of an off ramp from like the total authoritarian insanity of the Republican Party right now? Not, I'm not saying like a return to the, to the Republican Party of like, of Ronald Reagan, but is she somebody who is like looking across the aisle? She can like talk with like Democrats. She can talk with liberals. She can agree with them about like the importance of like, SNAP payments and Medicaid for poor people, which the things that she's like kind of come out in favor of. And then kind of recognize that like, maybe Democrats are just people she disagrees with. They're not necessarily her enemies. Like, I mean, that's a good thing, right? Especially if she's kind of pulling along, parts of the MAGA coalition that are sort of struggling with like reconciling, the the contradictions that they find themselves having to negotiate, right, with their supporter of like Trump. So um I think she's like actually like a good sign for American democracy. Now we'll see how far that goes. Like, who knows? Like maybe Trump will sweet talk her back into the tent. I don't know. But like her sort of like staking this point, which, she's still a right wing figure, but like, I mean, a right wing figure who isn't like all in on like authoritarianism and isn't all in on, she's criticized the ICE raids. She's suggested she thinks these ICE raids are going too far. So like, I mean, if someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who sort of has that kind of connection with the populist base, is kind of moving in this sort of like slowly de-radicalizing direction, I think that's a good sign. It's a good sign that there's like some, semblance of humanity and sort of respect for human dignity that's like holding like even inside somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And that could lead to more defections. She could inspire others to take a stand. So, I mean, I think it's like kind of a good thing that she's like thinking of like running for president, because it suggests that it will encourage her to sort of like potentially like deepen those divisions intentionally. Um so yeah, I mean, I think she's like actually like really significant development. And if you're, Trump and the rest of these people, I mean, I think she's a really big headache for you, especially as you're getting really unpopular, and um people are getting very pissed off about this government shutdown. And she's like a Republican who's blaming the Republican Party for it, right? Which is remarkable. So I mean, I think I think I think she's a big deal. Um and like I said before, just one of many moving pieces, in addition to the good election results from last night. So here we are, I think, living to live another day. Um, there's going to be tough days ahead, and I think the economy is bound to become much more tumultuous for all of us in the coming months and years. Given the situation, I think the the I mean, I think AI is a bubble. Personally, I think it's going to pop, and I think that's going to set in motion uh, some pretty dramatic events in our political and economic life in the months to come. And so yeah, there's going to be. I mean, look, I mean, ICE is still disappearing people off the streets. These masked thugs are still. We're seeing these videos. American citizens are being injured. Two American citizens have been shot by ICE um, in the last couple of weeks. So and I expect that with their hiring budget with Stephen Miller, who's um, you know uh, his pet project, right, is creating this secret police for authoritarian rule. I mean, that's going to continue to become a worsening concern. But hope is not dead. The opposition is gaining strength, and we have an opportunity here, and it's on all of us to um, remember, right, that like fear is how they win, right? So we hang on to our joy, right? We live the best lives we can under these conditions, and let love guide us in that way. That is our resistance, right? That is our happy resistance. And honestly, I think is I mean, it's your right, it's your life, right? Don't let tyranny take it from you, right? Uh, so stay strong. Remember that there's still tough times ahead. But celebrate this victory. Celebrate this reminder that courage matters, right? I mean, what Zoran Mondani did last night, right? That's courageous for him to stand up there before before the whole world was watching him, right? I mean, I mean, tens of millions of people around the world watched his speech, and he looked straight in the camera and he store down Donald Trump, and that's important. And it doesn't matter if you're a democratic socialist or a liberal or you're like a centrist or you're Marjorie Taylor Greene. I mean, she's not really challenging Trump directly. I hope she eventually does, but like, courage is important. Um, that that's infectious, and that will invite more resistance. So we need to do that. Be as courageous as you can. I think that's Timothy Snyder's 20th lesson and his 20 lessons on tyranny. So should read that book if you haven't gotten it. But anyways, it was great chatting with you guys for about an hour on this quick notes from the Circus Live, to share with you my thoughts of like where we are. I'm going to be joining Reed Galen tomorrow on a Substack Live at 6 p.m. Pacific, I believe. So you can check that out as well. We'll have a back and forth conversation, maybe expand on some of this. So thanks everyone, and have a great Wednesday night.